I love seeing all the books open. The big red one in front of you. Thank you. And you can just put the ribbon, and I'll be there in about 9 minutes. There are certain people from history whose contribution is so significant, yet their story has gotten lost over time. So I'm going to give you a name of someone, and I'm curious who knows it. And I want to know, especially if people younger than me know this person. Who knows who Henrietta Zold was? Only 3 people? You guys know Henrietta Zold. So, Tarimu Yadayim. Who knows who Henrietta Zold was? Okay. A few more. But what's interesting is how many people don't know who she is. So I'm going to tell you a piece of her story today. It's always important to know your sources. A piece of my source came from the Jewish Women's Archive, from a book by Francine Klagsburn, and from a book by David Ron's mother, Bilha Ron, and David is online. And I'm happy to share this story from his mom today. I actually believe that Henrietta Zold, put your name in her head because I want you to tell people about her, is one of the most important historic women, Jewish women, from the last century and a half. And to not know her story, to have it lost, that would be a shame. My hope is that you'll etch the story in your hearts today, and that you'll let her story inspire you to think about who you might be and what you can do. Some know her as the founder of the organization Hadassah, which is still thriving, alive and well. And we now associate Hadassah with hospitals. Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, Harat Sofim in Kerem. These are state-of-the-art, incredible cutting-edge medicine. But she started so much more than those hospitals. She helped shape the education system in Israel, the healthcare system beyond certain hospitals, social service programs. She actually began the School of Social Welfare in what was then Palestine and then became the State of Israel. She was a pioneering feminist. She was actually a scholar at the Jewish Theological Seminary where I studied. She wasn't allowed to be ordained, but she did every class that the male rabbis did. She was a woman who said there needs to be female leadership in every organization, and there needs to be equality. She was raised in a house that was steeped in Zionism, and she imagined an aspirational Zionism, a Zionism that wasn't just about ingathering, which is a piece of Zionism, but about the revival of Jewish culture within a place that would be our home. And I actually believe it's a Zionism that is very relevant for this moment in time. She was someone who saw that Jews and Arabs could live with equality, and she articulated what that might look like. We're so far from those aspirations. That's a piece of who she was. Let me give you a little bit more background. She was born in 1860. And in one of the stories about her, it was told that she was at the funeral of Abraham Lincoln. And she remembers her father lifting her up and saying, look at this great man. This great man is a little 5-year-old. She never married or had children, but she became known as the mother of Israel because she helped save thousands of Jewish children who came from Nazi-occupied Europe and Germany and made homes in Palestine. By the way, it used to be until the 1990s that Mother's Day in Israel was celebrated on her yahrzeit, the anniversary of her loss. By the way, there's this whole nother sermon, how that then morphed into Family Day and Mother's Day, flowers. It was on the day that honored her, because she, in many ways, was the matriarch of this country. She was a woman whose legacy is she impacted what became the state of Israel and lives of so many Israelis in big and small ways. She had an outsized sense of duty and an amazing capacity to get things done. She's changed our world. By the way, that's quite a claim. I always want to be careful not to exaggerate. She's changed our world. And I think as you hear a little bit more about her, you'll know why I make that claim. She got involved in Zionism from a young age. As I actually didn't mention, her dad was a rabbi, and they were talking about Zionist ideas early in the Zionist movement, the 1880s, 90s. She got involved in different Zionist organizations and was often the only woman in a leadership role. And those organizations became the foundation of the modern state of Israel. She didn't get to Israel itself until 1909. So she was almost 50 years old, and she wanted to visit the agricultural settlements that she had heard about, like, whoa, how transforming. And what she saw when she was there was actually something that she wasn't prepared for. She saw Jews who were suffering from poverty and sickness. And what she saw changed her. It changed the trajectory of her life and her activism. That brings me to the first verse. So now open up, page 1061. Re'eh, look. Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha v'klala. I put before you today blessing and curse. And I want to suggest that every one of us has blessing and curse in front of us. And depending on what we choose to see, that's what will determine how we respond. And it may be that moment in life in 1909, when Henrietta Szold saw Jews who were living in poverty and sickness, that what she saw caused her to say, how do I change what's indeed a klala into a bracha? What can we do so that when we see people in all of their humanity, we can help them? And I want to suggest that this word is an interesting one, because throughout the book of Deuteronomy, it doesn't tell us to see. It doesn't say re'eh. Which sense does it tell us to activate? Hear. Throughout the book of Deuteronomy, it says Shema. And so the rabbis will say, why does it say see here? By the way, keep the book open, because I'm going to look at the verse in a different way soon. I think that when we witness, when we ra'ah reality, we feel it in a different way. When I see a homeless person, it's different than me hearing about the problem of homelessness. When we see with eyes wide open, as opposed to eyes that are turning aside or averting, when we see something, then we can say, how do I bring bracha? And the next verse says, you know what? If you follow the mitzvah, that's very general and broad. But if we have an ethic that says, I have obligations to fellow human, to care for them, and you go through this portion, it talks about the person down on their luck. When we see them and we act, that's what brings bracha. And our job is to bring bracha. So what Henrietta Szold did following that trip to Israel was extraordinary. Follow me with the timeline. 1909, 1912, she forms this organization, Hadassah. She forms it here in America. And what she did is she had the foresight to know what makes organizations work. She had each group led by people from that area. Chapters spread all across America, hundreds of chapters, and she knew that meaning came as we sought to make a difference in the world in a real way. This is different than some of the American social service agencies that were popping up at that time. This said, you know what? There are immigrants coming to America. We need to have programs that teach them English. So Hadassah in the early 1900s was busy integrating immigrants to America, probably some of our relatives, and giving them the skills that they needed to succeed. She also said we need to weave together what's happening in what was then Palestine and America so that we can embed a connection to Zionism in Americans. The Zionism that I grew up with is a Zionism that directly links back to Henrietta Szold, who said, we can help build medicine. We can build X-ray clinics, dental clinics, medical clinics. We can build social work and social capacity within Israel. And she started all of these organizations, an infant wellness station, a hygiene awareness station, a nursing school in Jerusalem. What she did is she saw what was needed, and she had the capacity to help build it and pull others into those sacred tasks. My first trip to Israel, I was so excited to see the Chagall windows at Hadassah Hospital, because those stories became part of my story. And we need to tell her story again and again and again. She was a visionary who saw. She saw blessing what might be amidst curse, and she made it happen. That's what this verse is calling upon us to do. Re'eh, look. I've set before you blessing and curse. Know that you have a choice in terms of what you see. I think that one of the most significant things she did when she got to Israel, by the way, she went to Israel in 1920. She was back and forth a little bit. And when she got to Israel, she became involved in the 1930s with what was called Youth Aliyah. Somebody who could see what was coming responded. And Henrietta Szold, far earlier than many, many people, saw the threat of Hitler as it began early. And she believed that we needed to have waves of immigration to Israel. By the way, she wasn't the first who saw that we needed Aliyah, especially for youth, as a way of rescuing young people. But she was the one who understood the administrative complications, how to cut through them, and she knew the social and emotional problems that the children would have and how to solve them. So here's why I'm going to bring in David Ron's mother, Bilhah. Bilhah was born in what was Palestine in 1930. David put together a book for her 95th birthday and just gave it to her. It was a surprise. It was a book that gathered writings that she had had from all throughout the years, and they were beautiful, beautiful writings. David, your mother was a really gifted writer. Her parents came from Russia in 1922, full of optimism and dreams for a new future. Those Zionists, the early Zionists, they dreamed and they built a new future. And then, and I'll tell you more about this a teeny bit later, she met and fell in love with Sam, who was a survivor of the Holocaust from Poland. His stories are harrowing. And like her parents, he left his life in Europe behind to start a new life in Israel. They started a family together at the same time Israel was beginning as a new country, and this set the stage for her life. It formed her values and gave her direction. She grew up in a little moshav, and one of the stories she writes is about the woman who was the nurse at her school in Hod HaSharon, a woman named Hannah. And she hadn't known Hannah's story. You know, often people don't tell their painful stories. But Hannah at one point, much later, came to America and visited them. And when Bilhah asked about her story, Hannah told her it. I'm going to read to you Bilhah's words about her encounter with Hannah and what Hannah said about her family. Hannah said that my family, the Naiman family, was very wealthy and well known in Germany. And in 1935, as Hitler came to power, my parents responded to the call from the Jewish Agency to rescue Jewish children and send them to Israel. By the way, in the 1930s, Henrietta Zold was sending representatives to Germany to tell the people to send their children to Israel. That's an extraordinary, extraordinary detail. This was her program. And Hannah continues, I was 15. I was taken to the train by my parents and sent to the strange Israel, that land so far away. I'll often try to enter those moments and imagine what it must have been like to be separated from parents and family. Here's what she wrote. She wrote, my younger sister was sent into the arms of strangers in England. Parents so desperate that they sent their children to different countries. And she said, along with a group of other German Jewish teenagers, I settled into a kibbutz in northern Galilee, and we were all bewildered and frightened. She said, we faced a new language, culture, lifestyle. Many of us were confused and depressed. I remember that I sent my clothes to the kibbutz laundry, and everyone teased me about the fancy silk underwear that I brought. It made her feel terrible. She said one day, the kibbutz heard that Henrietta Zold was coming to see how she might help. And here's what Hannah writes. I'll never forget how this gray-haired, beautiful, older woman with remarkable, engaging eyes spoke to each and every one of us. You know that person who sees you and can speak to you even in a group? Do you have that person? That person who may be seen as famous by others, but when you're with them, all they see is you? That's who Henrietta Zolt was for Hannah. She asked me, Hannah, why I was so stressed out and how I saw my future and how she could help. And I began to cry, and I replied that my parents was all that I wanted was my parents. And I wanted to study to be a nurse. And she writes that Henrietta Zolt hugged her and said, when the war's over, we'll search for your family. But for now, I'm going to take you to Hadassah Nursing School. So while Hannah never found her family, sadly, they perished on the killing fields of Europe, she became a nurse and touched so many other people, paying it forward. Now go back to this line. Re'eh, look. Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha v'klala. I've put before you blessing and curse. Henrietta Zolt didn't just see the blessing of what needed to be in terms of institutions and organizations. She saw the blessing in each and every individual. She saw a traumatized child and looked into her eyes and helped her realize her visions and her dreams. She knew what to ask in order to truly see someone. She knew how to respond in a way that helped acknowledge the curse that can be so real and so hidden and loom so large. In writing the story, Bilhah gave a PS. She said that she was born at Hadassah Hospital in Tel Aviv in 1930. She met her husband Sam in 1947, where he was recovering from wounds suffered in the War of Independence, and she was a nursing aide. Sam, by the way, was also a child survivor of concentration camps, as I mentioned, and he came to Israel as a youth Aliyah leader. All of the circles of connection. By the way, some people can look and change everything by what they see and how they respond. That's the story I want you to tell. Go to someone you don't know and say, have you heard about Henrietta Zold? I'm going to tell you her story. Now I want you to look at the verse in a slightly different way. This is based on the commentator Or HaChaim. Is your finger on it? Re'eh, look. He doesn't say the next clause is Anochi noten lifnechem, I put before you. He says, read it as Re'eh Anochi. Look at me. And Or HaChaim says that what Moses is saying is, hey, look at me. If I could be a leader and do things with the people, you can be a leader. Look at me. I'm the guy who couldn't talk, and now I can. Look at me. I hung with you all of those years. You know what? You can do that too, because he's preparing for the next generation. Moses is teaching that each of us, Anochi, has the potential to be his equal. Look at me. I can do it, and so can you. So I want to ask that we do this, that we look out as Henrietta Zold did and see not only problems that need to be fixed, but people who need our care and attention. And we can either close our eyes, we can turn away, we can ignore what we have seen, or we can look for potential solutions. Sometimes it's hard to even imagine what they might be and act in small and in big ways. By the way, I don't think that as I see, I will have the impact of Moses or Henrietta Zold, but like them, I know I can do something, that I can begin to turn curse into blessing. So I leave you with this word, re'eh, look, see, bring blessing, change curse into blessing. Shabbat shalom, everyone. And you know, Eli, you've heard me say this before, but it's really true. Almost every sermon I write comes from the inspiration of the young people with whom I study. And you and I were looking at your portion, and we were talking about how you needed to give tzedakah to someone who's poor. And you were saying how easy it is to avert your gaze, to no longer see. And you said, you know, I know that sometimes I've done that. You have this honesty and integrity. And you said, the lesson here for me is not to do that. The lesson for me is to turn toward. The lesson for me is to see. Each and everything that we studied, and there were scores of concepts in here, you took and you said, how do I make it me? And to study with a young person with a capacity to truly live a life of ethics and thoughtfulness, kindness and care, that lifts me up. That gives me the capacity to see people the way I want to see them because of how you see people and how you treat. You have a kindness, you have a gentleness, you have a thoughtfulness that we celebrate today. I know that you were a little nervous today. And on a certain level, that's a good thing because it means it's an important day. And I hope that as you reflect on today, what you can see is what you accomplished. What you can see is that the essence of the day is about who you are and who you are becoming. And that you can see that today is about stepping in to your legacy and your peoplehood and your history and your story. Mazal tov. I'm actually going to take Eli next door where we have another service going because they all want to see him and wish him Mazel Tov. But he will be back for you all to hurl candy at him and to conclude the service to hear Ima and Abba and what they have to say and their blessings.
Yeshua Rabbi Ezra.